So this pattern here is super simple to draw. Grab a couple of wiggly lines around the page, loop them across each other, overlap them. That's kind of important part of this actually. If you can overlap them, that creates a little bit more variety later on. And make sure that you draw a little loop right at the end. Every time you draw a new line, make sure that you draw a little raindrop loop on either side of it. The next step is to really focus and zoom in on every single new line that you have created and to outline the entire thing. Don't forget to outline both sides and then just continue going on around your page and creating an outline or an inline around all of the lines that you have previously drawn. Try to keep a consistent distance, I would say. And as you can see, I haven't, but if you could try to keep a consistent sort of distance, it creates some really nice unity later on. Don't be too worried if you don't though, because once you add the final step, it kind of just doesn't really matter in the end. As long as it's only about, I don't know, half a centimetre away from the previous lines that you've drawn, that should do it. The next step now is to create these beautiful raindrop petals and fill in all of that white space that you have created now with the outline, to fill it entirely with these petals. So start in one corner, one sort of corner angle. Doesn't really matter whereabouts you start, but just as long as you try to draw the next petals attached to or close to that initial start point. Now, if something happens and you have multiple edges and corners, then you just go around, do a group of 3 or 4 or 5, and then just sort of move on. If you've got these little skinny parts, just move along the line just as I have there, and just to create an upward moving line of petals. When I did this, I tried to keep it all in a similar direction. So I would start from the bottom of a shape and create upward moving petals. It doesn't really matter though. I've noticed once I look at this artwork, it doesn't really matter whereabouts you start or what direction those petals go in, as long as you follow a similar sequence, and that is attaching the previous petal to the next one and so on, and moving in that sequence. As long as you have that continuous pattern, it doesn't really matter where you start or where you end. And if you do notice that you have lots of extra space, just go in there with your pen and add some extra little petals. Now we have the final step, which is coloring all of that space in the background behind the petals that you've created and stopping at the outline line that you created. It's coloring all of that space in with a solid color. I've chosen black, as you can see. I'm sure you can choose other colors and I'm sure it would look amazing, but I really wanted to create a black and white image to start with, so that's what I sort of committed to. Once you go in and color all of that, you can see that I'm correcting some of the lines there. As I was explaining earlier, it doesn't really matter if you don't have a super consistent distance as an outline, because in this final step, you go in and you really focus on creating a crisp finish by focusing specifically on tidying up the lines as you go around and color, straightening up any wobbly lines, filling in all of those spaces, and possibly even adding a few more petals if you notice that the space that you have is a little bit too big. If you want to fill that gap in as well, you can do that. Another thing that you do during this step is coloring in the petal that is at the end of the initial lines that we drew. So remember, the squiggly lines that we drew have petals at the end of them. So those particular petals need to be colored in black, as well as the background of the petal fill that you created. I'm not coloring in any of the petals in the petal bundles that we've drawn, only because, as you can see, it's really starting to take shape now. You're getting that really nice black and white opposite effect. So I think it looks quite nice when it's a finished product. The only thing I can say here is this process takes a while. So this step here, I think it took me about an hour to fill in all of those gaps. I've sped this video up times 5, I think, or times possibly 6 or 7, because obviously I do this live, and the people that I'm speaking to, sometimes I get a little bit distracted, sometimes I stop what I'm doing and start something else. But yeah, this process takes a little while. So the coloring, the final step here, takes about an hour to do, depending on what size paper you're using. This size page is an A5. So if you had an A4 standard page, if you cut that in half, that's actually an A5. So that's the size of this drawing here. And a little bit smaller because I've created that border. But this is just going to go ahead now and continue to fill in that background. I decided not to cut out any of the process when it came to this video, because, you know, a lot of the videos that I've watched people create chop out a lot of the important parts, I find. So I often wonder, oh my gosh, how did they get from this point to that point? So I really wanted to create this consistent walkthrough from beginning to end. So I can tell you now, I'm going to just simply be coloring for the rest of this video. So if you'd like to see the end results, you could just sort of skip through. Otherwise, if you'd like to continue on watching the process, then please feel free to watch. I also keep talking, so there are little tidbits of my voice later on in the video too, if you'd like to keep watching and listening to what I'm saying. I actually saw somebody create something very similar to this, which gave me the idea in the first place to redraw this, but they colored it in, and they used, you know, when you look at the color wheel, obviously you have colors that are next to each other, you have colors that are opposite each other, and those opposite colors are usually called, or can be called, opposite colors or complementary colors. Now, those complementary colors create the most, I would say, contrast on a page. So you could really, if you wanted to, create a really outstanding, colorful work by just using complementary colors from the color wheel. For example, if you have the color red, the opposite or complementary color to red is green. Or if you have, for example, the color purple, just sort of a step over from red, then the complementary color to the purple would be lighter green, and so on. So if you had blue, the opposite color would be orange, and so on and so forth. So you could really create a really nice contrast and excitement in a artwork by using color theory. If you're interested in learning more about these types of patterns and discovering new ideas and things like that, there are some really, really great resources out there online. It's just so simple. It's just at your fingertips, you know. You can do a quick little Google search. A quick one for me that I use often because I spend most of my time doing my lives on TikTok is just scrolling through and having a look at some Zentangle patterns and different patterns that people have previously drawn. It's just endless amounts of ideas, and you know, a lot of it is really fun to do and really, really therapeutic. So I would advise, and this is it's not very difficult. You don't have to be a professional artist or even good at it. To be honest, you don't have to be that great to do this kind of thing. So I would just really advise, if you want to pick up a new hobby, or if you're trying to look for something to relax your mind and just sort of take you on a bit of a journey outside of what you're doing, grab a piece of paper, grab a pen, grab a texter, and get creative. And if you'd like to follow me and possibly catch me live doing one of these tutorials in person, you can head over to TikTok, and I am at Live Artsy Vibes. I hope I get to see you there. Here is the final product. And if you ask me, it looks pretty cool.